All right, everybody. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of In Liberty and Health. Crazy weekend, huh? We're obviously going to talk about Venezuela a lot, as I have been on the channel the last couple weeks, and we're going to talk about Iran as well, and also kind of China's reaction to the situation in Venezuela, because we're told that China is all up in Venezuela's business, and they're basically running the state there, which just isn't true. Um, but we're going to talk about all this stuff, so please make sure you like, subscribe on the way in, and leave a thumbs up, leave a comment if you so choose. I'll get the questions and all that stuff if anybody has any. We are on YouTube, Twitter, and Rumble as well. So if you're on YouTube, just feel free to go over to Rumble and subscribe over there. Um, Lots of cool stuff for me personally going on. So, like I said, please make sure you're subscribed. Go to all the links below. You can figure out everything that I've got going on. Of course, go to tigerfitness.com where you can get this awesome shirt and get some awesome supplements. Use code Kyle at checkout to let them know that you support the Matovcik family. And of course, you support the supplement company that supports you. And of course, go to Fox Sons Coffee, use code Kyle at checkout. Like I said, today we're going to be talking a lot about Venezuela. I got a few news stories pulled up. We're going to talk about the capturing of Nicolas Maduro, which is just kind of crazy. And I'm seeing a lot of people run along with this, and it's kind of shocking because I was always told that the neocons were gone. But for some reason, we're just supporting this policy by Marco Rubio, which once again, I've talked about this ad nauseum. It's amazing that people still kind of don't see this for what it is. So, yeah, of course, go to the Great Megalodon as well. Subscribe over there on Substack, where you can just get my heavy metal stuff. So if you're not interested in all this political stuff, sooner or later there will be a YouTube channel for that. I got a few more irons in the fire for this. So yeah, lots of cool stuff over there. Of course, hopefully everybody listened to the last show I did with Dave DeCamp, where we talked about some of this stuff as well. Alex Patino, good morning, and thank you so much for stopping by. Yes, I had a good New Year. Hopefully you had a great New Year as well. So I guess without further ado, let's get into the rest of today's show. All right, and one more time, welcome back, everybody. Hopefully, you've had a fantastic new year. Hopefully, you had a good holiday season and all that good stuff. We are now in January of 2026. It's the second stream of the year. Kind of crazy. It doesn't feel like it's 2026. I swear to God, 2025 just went by like that, just here and gone. Like it's just we had no idea it was even over, and then it was over. Um, Couple quick thoughts. I didn't think that Trump would go the whole way through with capturing a foreign leader and bringing him to the United States on completely bunk pretenses, but here we are. It's it's pretty nuts, and like I said, to see the reaction of people who claim to be anti-war or claim to be against regime change now celebrating this, I gotta say it's a no for me, dog. So we're gonna talk about that today. Like I've laid out in previous streams now for the last couple of months, I said that something like this was coming. Either that or they were going to have to decide if they want to shit or get off the pot because they have tons and tons and tons of military assets in the region. So either they were going to do something like this or they were just going to have to back down. It's not really in Trump's nature to kind of back down and take an L. That's kind of going on. The reason why Trump won't end the war in Ukraine is because he wants to do kind of like an about face and make it seem like he won, but also not humiliate Putin because Putin's not going to take the humiliation well, and assuming that he would even take the humiliation. So, just being realistic about a lot of these situations, it's not good. So, a lot of people are celebrating, saying it's over already, kind of like they were doing with the Iran deal. But as we're going to cover a little bit later on in the show, that situation is still just completely unresolved, and now they're saying they're going to go back in. So we got lots to talk about. So I got a few stories pulled up from antiwar.com. Where else? Archive, the New York Times archive, and for Reuters, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the People's Republic of China. So yeah, I guess let's get into all the news of what's going on with Venezuela. And like I said, we'll talk about Iran a little bit later on. So, first story up from our dear friend Kyle Anzalone over at antiwar.com. US bombs Venezuelan capital and captures President Maduro. We're going to cover casualties and everything like that, or at least casualties as they're reported. At 12:30 p.m., Donald Trump said the US would run Venezuela. Oh no, I'm sorry. Am I in the right story? Bombs Venezuelan. Uh Yeah, I think I got the right story. Anyways, um, the U.S. conducted airstrikes in Caracas, captured Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife. Maduro is being brought to the U.S. to face charges of drug trafficking. And he put an update right at the top there. President Donald Trump said the U.S. would run Venezuela until a new government is installed by Washington. He threatened to conduct second and much larger attack on Venezuela if Caracas resists Trump's regime change. Quote, the United States of America has successfully carried out a large-scale strike against Venezuela and its leader, President Nicolas Maduro, who has been along with his wife, captured and flown out of the country. President Donald Trump announced on Truth Social early Saturday morning. He wrote that a press conference will be held later in the day to provide more details. So I guess like first impressions, he did do that press conference. We're going to cover some of the commentary there. I don't have any of his commentary pulled up, but we are just going to kind of talk about what was said in that press conference. It is kind of impressive. I'm not gonna lie that they went in there and got him out as quick as they did. I think that might be because there could have been some leaks in the ranks. As far as I know, there doesn't seem to be any evidence of that, but I'm not saying that that's not possible. Kind of seems like something like that probably did happen. Someone might have thrown him under the bus. They had a lot of military assets deployed in the region, so maybe they were kind of doing reconnaissance missions or something like that, trying to figure out what the best way to do this is. And they had deployed, I guess, some troops. I don't know how many exactly. Four comes to mind, but I'm thinking of Operation Gideon when I say that number. But they had used the airstrikes to protect the troops, which is just kind of nuts. Like they managed to get in there and get out. They captured the president and are now bringing him to New York. And it doesn't seem as like aggressive as you would think it would be. So I don't know how this is going to go. I don't think the situation's over yet, but once again, we still have yet to see. A lot of people are celebrating it, and I just I hesitate to call a situation over until things seem to have settled down. Um, the U.S. first charged Maduro with drug trafficking in 2020. Since President Trump returned to office, the U.S. has increased pressure on Maduro by naming him the leader of a narco terrorist cartel and offering $50 million bounty for his capture. However, Washington has offered many allegations but little public evidence of Maduro's supposed role in the group, and the often repeated claims that his senior officials are likely overstated. Instead of the so-called cartel, appears to operate like those loose-knit partnership of corrupt mid-level officials, opportunistic soldiers, and organized criminals, in an arrangement tolerated and overseen but not orchestrated by the several central government in Caracas. Senator Mike Lee wrote on X, Twitter, that Secretary of State Marco Rubio informed him that Maduro has been arrested by U.S. personnel to stand trial on criminal charges in the United States, and that kinetic action we saw tonight was deployed to protect and defend those executing the arrest warrant. Mike Lee just got off the phone with Secretary Rubio. Oh, of course. I just want to read the whole tweet. I'll skip past this, but I'll read you the whole tweet. Um, Mike Lee said just got off the phone with Secretary of State Rubio. He informed me that Nicolas Maduro has been arrested by U.S. personnel to stand trial. On criminal charges in the United States, and that the kinetic action we saw tonight was deployed to protect and defend those executing the warrant arrest. This action likely falls within the president's inherent authority under Article 2 of the Constitution to protect U.S. personnel from an actual imminent attack. So this is just such like a bullshit um, justification, because you sent the people in, you attacked a sovereign country, which is an act of war. Everybody would recognize that as an act of war. You have a blockade on a country, which is another act of war. And then now you bomb those people from an imminent attack because we attacked their country. The justification you always hear for Israel and Hamas is that Israel has a right to defend itself. So does Venezuela have a right to defend itself? I would argue yes. If you're being invaded, you have a right to repel off invaders. It's that simple. So we invade a country and then we drop bombs on it. We kill a bunch of civilians, which we're going to cover here in a little bit, and then we cite Article 2 of the Constitution to say we're protecting our people from an imminent attack that we're perpetrating on another country. It's too much for me. You guys are absolutely fucking nuts. Lee claimed that because the U.S. forces invaded Caracas to capture Maduro, Trump had the authority to strike Venezuela under Article 2 of the Constitution to protect U.S. personnel from an actual or imminent attack. A U.S. official told the New York Times that there were no American casualties during the operation. Following the attack, Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez said the government was unable to locate Maduro and his wife. She demanded that the U.S. provide proof of life. Rodriguez added that both the Venezuelan civilians and military personnel were killed in U.S. strikes. The first thing President Maduro told the people of Venezuela was people to the streets, activated as a militia, activating all of the nation's comprehensive defense plans. The vice president said, no one will undermine the historic legacy of our liberator father, Simon Bolivar. The people of Venezuela, in perfect national unity, must mobilize to defend their natural resources from and what is most sacred, the right to independence and to the future. Russia quickly condemned the American attack and restarted its support for the Venezuelan government. Earlier today, the United States carried out an act of armed aggression against Venezuela. This has prompted deep concern and condemnation. A statement from the foreign ministry said, "We reaffirm our solidarity with the Venezuelan people and our support, of course, of its Bolivarian leadership aimed at protecting the country's natural interests and sovereignty." So I guess since they kind of ended the article there, I wanted to show the statement from the Chinese foreign ministry because there was a Chinese delegation in Caracas at the time, or not at the time of the strikes, to my understanding. I've heard chatter that Trump had communicated to Russia and China about this. I haven't seen no confirmation of that, so I don't know. I'm just telling you what I've heard. Um, there was a Chinese diplomatic visit in Caracas, which we all do, or all countries do. We all send foreign ministry or individuals to different countries to meet with people for diplomatic reasons. And that's largely probably what this was. Because once again, people are really blowing up the relationship with Venezuela and China. If you want to sever this relationship that Venezuela has with China, then why don't we do better business with them? Why don't we give them, once again, preferred trading status? Why don't we say, hey, we're going to let you have access to US markets with absolutely zero tariffs, and we want your oil, we'll be your preferred trading partner. The reason why Venezuela trades so much with China is because they're under such brutal sanctions, and China's the only country that's willing to basically overcome those sanctions. Either that or they're able to navigate those sanctions the best out of everybody. Lift the embargo on the country and we'll pretty much be okay. Foreign ministry spokesperson remarks on the U.S. military strikes on Venezuela. The question was, it's reported that the U.S. launched military strikes on Venezuela, and Donald Trump posted on Truth Social that the U.S. has, quote unquote, successfully carried out a large scale strike against Venezuela, and its leader, President Nicolas Maduro, along with his wife, have been taken and flown out of the country. What's China's comment? Answer: China is deeply shocked by and strongly condemns U.S. blatant use of force against a sovereign state and action against its president. Such hegemonic acts of the U.S. seriously violate international law in Venezuela's sovereignty and threaten peace and security in Latin America and the Caribbean region. China firmly opposes it. We call on the U.S. to abide by international law and the purposes and principles of the UN Charter and stop violating other countries' sovereignty and security. So I've seen a bunch of right-wing people saying, making a plea to international law is fake and gay and retarded, pretty much, which I'm sympathetic to that, and I kind of understand that. But you can't really make the plea to the election being stolen because you're basically upholding the same thing. Like, oh, well, we all recognize democracy. You can say that we can enforce it, but democracy wasn't enforced if you believe the election was stolen in 2020. And also, it kind of is true that might does make right. That's what the argument should be. Do I agree with it? No, because once again, I think countries have a right to their own sovereignty, and countries should be able to seek and protect what goes on in their own borders. We shouldn't be concerned about other countries. And like I've made this point ad nauseum as well, is that like if you showed me a million deportations, if you showed me an end to some of the wars, if you cleaned up America and you said, hey, we're going after the dictator in South America, which I could give a fuck less what Maduro does in Venezuela to his own people. He's not a threat to America. He's not a concern to America. People claim something about him stealing the election in 2020, even though it was Joe Biden who put the one that, or, who partially kept the bounty on his head and put the bounty on his head. And kept all the sanctions on Venezuela, then and Pam Bondi's not even going to charge Nicolas Maduro with manufacturing or doing whatever with the 2020 elections. So, like a lot of these charges are already bullshit, or these allegations are bullshit. But leaving all that aside, If Trump did at least half of what he campaigned on, I wouldn't be that upset about a coup in Venezuela. I would still not like it and I'd still speak out against it like I am right now. But we can't even clean up our own streets and we're here kidnapping the president. Like we seriously cannot make our own country great, but we're over here kidnapping a president of a sovereign country. I mean, it's ridiculous to the highest degree. So and it really just feels like a distraction from the fact that the Trump administration is largely failing on a lot of its promises. So, anyways, let's get to some of the casualty reports here. Venezuelan official says at least 40 people were killed in the U.S. attack. The official said the dead include civilians and military personnel. At least one of the civilians was killed in a U.S. airstrike outside of Caracas, according to her family. At least 40 people were killed in the U.S. attack on Venezuela early Saturday, including military personnel and civilians, according to a senior Venezuelan official who spoke on the condition of anonymity to describe preliminary reports. President Trump, speaking on Fox News on Saturday, said that no American troops had been killed. He suggested, however, that some service members had been injured. General Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said later today at a news conference at Mar-a-Lago with Trump that U.S. helicopters moving to extract President Nicolas Maduro and his wife had come under fire. He said that the one helicopter had been hit but remained flyable and that all U.S. aircrafts came home. In the immediate aftermath of the U.S. attack, details began to emerge of the death of the Venezuelan civilian Katia Lamar, a low-income coastal area just key west of the Caracas airport. There, an airstrike hit a three-story civilian apartment complex and knocked out an exterior wall early Saturday as U.S. forces assaulted the city. The strike killed Rosa Gonzalez, 80. Her family said seriously wounded a second person. In the afternoon, a government investigator was present in the area of the strike, interviewing witnesses and picking up projectiles. William Gonzalez, Miss Gonzalez's nephew, said he ducked when he heard the strike at about 2 a.m. but nearly lost an eye. He had 3 stitches on the side of his face. Mr. Gonzalez, who appeared numb hours later, showed journalists where the U.S. ordnance had hit and asked where he would go now that he had lost his home. He had simply said, "I don't know." He spoke little as he bent down and searched for whatever valuables he could salvage. He picked up an old umbrella and carried a set of drawers. The strike left an interior of an apartment exposed to the public. Among the wreckage was a portrait of Venezuelan independence hero Simon Bolivar that looked like it had been riddled with shrapnel. So, for those listening, you could see just the entire side of a building just completely destroyed. And then, yeah, there's the painting in the background that got hit with shrapnel. Um, and here it's his neighbors trying to help people affected by the strike in Katia Lamar, Venezuela on Saturday. So, I mean, people could say there were no casualties. We still kind of have yet to see what the exact details on that is. But I mean, you killed 40 Venezuelans, which um, I hate to even walk this line, but to give the Trump administration credit, like at least there weren't a lot more casualties. I mean, 40 is still a lot of people, and there could still be more. There could even be less, but this situation is still largely unresolved, and we don't know what the final result's going to be. I think people running a victory lap are celebrating very prematurely because we don't know what comes after. And they're saying that Marco Rubio is in contact with Delcy Rodriguez, but the government around Maduro is still largely intact. And I don't think anybody knows how exactly they're going to react to this going forward. Are they just going to take, Delcy Rodriguez is now the president and just kind of go from there? Well, I don't know. There were people saying that she fled to Russia, but apparently now she's back in Caracas. So just a lot of questions, not a lot of answers. Making the bet here that I don't think the Venezuelan people and I don't think the American people are going to be better off because of this regime change operation. So let's finish up this article here. Let me blow this back up. My bad. One neighbor, a 70-year-old man named Jorge, who declined to give his last name, said he lost everything in the airstrike. Several people were gathered outside on Saturday afternoon while others searched what remained of their apartments. Most were barely speaking. Some of the residents outside were praying, others were angry. One man who gave his name as Javier blamed greed for the attack on Venezuela, an apparent reference to the Trump administration's stated desire to let American companies take control of the Venezuelan oil fields. The lives of people like him, he said, meant nothing. The residents said that 4 men had tried to rescue Mr. Gonzalez or Miss Gonzalez after the airstrike. They'd carried her into a motorbike and took her to a hospital, but she was declared dead on arrival. Another woman who was also taken to the hospital Another woman was also taken to the hospital. Residents were later told she had survived but was in critical condition. So I don't know, man. People are saying, "Oh, this is so cool." I've never been of the mind that like these military operations where you just en masse kill people needlessly for no good reason and actually largely based on lies. I can't get behind this stuff, man. I can't. I never could. People watch the videos of the boats getting blown up and oh, dude, how cool. That's not my thing, man. Every life is a miracle, and maybe I'll share the post about how many abortions happened last year. But before we do that, here's a quick ad. All right, we're going to take a second today to chill and tell you about the show's sponsors, Tiger Fitness. Make sure you go to the link below to get all the supplements that I use day in, day out, and beyond. As I always say, you do not need supplements to become all jacked and tan or to progress in your health journey, but they could definitely be a useful tool in that respect. So, as you can see on tigerfitness.com, we got MTS Nutrition, Blackstone Labs, Ambrosia, HPN, Nutrix Research, America Labs, Alani New, Pump Chasers, there's Redcon One, Accent Sledge, plenty of different companies that pretty much have absolutely any supplement you could possibly think of: pre-workouts, fat burners, BCAAs, electrolyte mixes, you name it, it's on there. So go to Tiger Fitness through the link below. Use code Kyle at checkout to let them know that I sent you. Get your protein powder, you name it, anything that's going to help you stick to your diet and hopefully achieve your health goals. All right, thanks. Back to the show. All right, and welcome back. We are going to share this tab. Give me one second. And the leading cause of death worldwide, which is just absolutely astounding to me, is abortion. Let me zoom in here. Abortion was the leading cause of death worldwide in 2025, killing 73 million people. Just absolutely nuts. And that really seems to have flown under the radar. I am pro life as pro life gets. Maybe not as pro life gets, but very pro life. I do believe that life starts at conception. And this really flew under the radar. And it's amazing that more people aren't quite talking about it. So I just want to make sure I carved out a little bit of time today to talk about that. It's truly tragic. So let's go to the next story from Kyle Anzalone as well from antiwar.com. Trump, we are in Venezuela now and we're going to stay. So people talking about how this is over and oh, this was such like a seamless operation. I beg to differ because why are we staying in Venezuela? And it seems like we're pretty much getting an occupation at this point. And Trump said as much. Trump said there could be more strikes. He said that we're going to install somebody friendly and they're going to give dividends to people. I'm very confused about what's going to happen next. So Trump, we're in Venezuela now and we're going to say Trump claimed Washington would pay for the occupation of Venezuela with profits from the country's oil. And I've seen Scott Horton say this that we're supposed to get discounts on oil from the war in Iraq, which everybody could tell me if you're listening right now, did you see gas prices get cheaper after the war in Iraq? The answer is no. Yeah, Rothschild said we need to stay for our freedoms. Yeah, exactly. Um, and I've seen a bunch of people show this, and I think this is part of it, is that Venezuela didn't have a Rothschild backed bank. Like, there's so many different strings to pull out here, and I think all of them are right, but it's not just one or the other. It's all these things combined. So, Venezuela had a trading partnership with China. They had a relationship with Russia and they had a relationship with Iran. Now, the idea that they were like funding Hezbollah or something like that, that's just like ridiculous. Like it's just checking off the box for boomers to just lose their mind about. Okay, so they had a relationship with the three countries that the US wants to fight a war against and sees as like global competitors. Okay, can't have that. They don't have a Rothschild bank or they're not part of like the global banking system. Can't have that. They stopped selling oil to Israel in 2009. Can't have that. And then you had a leader in the region who, by hook or by crook, was against the US and allegedly wasn't elected or lost the election last time, which I don't care. Everybody's saying this and they're talking about this. Oh, he didn't win the election. He's not legitimate. Who cares? I don't care. Why do you care? People are showing Venezuelans celebrating. I don't care. What does this do for Americans? And why is nobody talking about that? We just spent a whole assload of taxpayer dollars to put all this naval power right off the coast of Venezuela, captured a leader for what? How are Americans more safe? How are Americans better off for this whole situation? And nobody can answer that. Like I said at the beginning of the show, and like I threw up a status on Facebook, if you showed me a million deportations, if you showed me Obama in handcuffs, if you showed me an end of the war in Gaza or an end of the war in Ukraine, not both, but even just one, I'd be like, all right, well, I mean, at least they're trying. But they're not even trying that. I have people messaging me, a good friend of mine who I love dearly, I really do, saying, "Oh, look at the national security strategy. You can see why they're doing all this." But the problem is, like in the national security strategy, they're talking about pulling back from like the Middle East and all these other areas. They're not even doing that. We just bombed Nigeria last week, and then we're bombing Somalia. Now we bombed Venezuela. uh, like we're not pulling back from any of the previous wars of the previous administrations. We're expanding all of them. We're getting more involved in the Middle East. And as I'm going to talk about later with Iran, they're probably going to go back in. So, like, we're getting none of the stuff that they're promising, like all the good stuff in the national security strategy. We're getting all the bad stuff. Scott Horton had always said that, like, you can depend on a promise or on a president to break all the good promises and keep all the bad ones. That's essentially what we're getting here. Okay, so where was I? Following a military operation that captured President Nicolas Maduro, President Trump said the U.S. would run Venezuela until an acceptable government is set up, which means we're probably going to be in there indefinitely. We're going to run Venezuela until such time as we can do a safe, proper, judicious transition. We don't want to be involved with having somebody else get in and then we have the same situation that we had, President said on Saturday. We're there now and we're going to stay until the proper transition takes place. Trump went on to say the U.S. is prepared to attack Venezuela again. We are ready to stage a second, much larger attack if we need to do so. All political and military figures in Venezuela should understand what happened to Maduro can happen to them, and it will happen if they aren't fair. Which, like, what does that mean? How do you expect to change an entire government overnight? Like, it's just not realistic to expect really any government to do that. The president did not name a new leader of Venezuela. However, Marina Corina Machado said, "Today we are prepared to enforce our mandate and take power." Machado is a Venezuelan opposition figure who won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2025, and she has endorsed U.S. sanctions and military action against Venezuela. Um, I've listened to Max Blumenthal and Anya Parampil talk about this, and even Trump said in that meeting that they weren't taking Marina Corina Machado very seriously, who's basically been around as a patsy, a CIA cutout figure for the U.S. since like George Bush. I don't think they're interested in putting her in there, and she like checked off all the boxes for what the U.S. would want. So I don't know what exactly their plan is or who they would install. Juan Guaido, as far as I know, he's like a joke now. Like nobody's talking about him. Um, they're not. You could try to put Delcy Rodriguez in there, but no one knows. Like, is she going to be dependable? Is she more loyal to Maduro and the apparatus that he had set up? Like I said, there's just a lot of questions that are unanswered right now, and I don't see the situation getting stabilized very easily. It's possible, but I think it's very, very unlikely. Trump did say he had not spoken with Machado, adding that she doesn't have the respect need to lead the country, which is once again to the point I was just making. Vice President Delcy Rodriguez said following the attack that she had activated Maduro's military plans. The first thing President Maduro told the people of Venezuela is people to the streets activate his militia, activating all the nation's comprehensive defense plans. Said the vice president, no one will undermine the historic legacy. I basically read this whole paragraph in the other article. Trump claimed his administration spoke with Rodriguez, who agreed to work with the U.S. When asked by the press, now, once again, I guess I should caveat this as well, is that Maduro said he was willing to work with the U.S. as well. He's willing to, quote unquote, give up everything. And they still went in there and it's, overthrew the government. Um, what are the chances the new leader is kiss the wall? Very, very, very high. Very high. I remember, guys, Russia and China had been getting frisky with Venezuela and were buying that oil without using the US petrodollar. Your sins can be anything, but if you try to de-dollarize, that's a big no-no. Yeah, exactly. They were operating outside the US dollar system, so the US basically couldn't get their fair share of it. And like I've made this argument before. Why wouldn't they just say, "Hey, Maduro, you could stay in power if you let us back the petrodollar with Venezuelan oil. Let's cut out all the Middle East," which actually would be a pretty good idea. We'll send tons of industry down to Venezuela. You can even employ Venezuelans. We'll draw out the oil with US companies and Venezuela. So that way your people get jobs, we get the oil, and then we'll share the oil with you. Everybody will make money and we'll even sell the oil to China, but it has to be in dollars. That's even more preferable than just a regime change, which now is going to destabilize the country. And we're going to talk about how this is actually going to make this way worse. Um, eh, I've talked about this ad nauseum. China wants to invade Taiwan, so this puts their schedule back. This is like saying that China, or like the US would invade Hawaii. They don't want to invade Taiwan. And even if they do, once again, what's the US going to do about it? And who really cares? It's everybody recognizes this is or China's sovereign territory. So even if they do, once again, what's the US going to do about it? Um, I really just like I'm so indifferent to that question, and people think that like this is the next thing up. They've made it very clear they seek to muddle along and not really do this huge military show. They blockaded the island. Let me put myself up here. They blockaded the island after the US had sold arms to them because they're basically saying, like, hey, quit fucking around in our region. China and Russia never, well, Russia had sent arms to Venezuela, but like China doesn't do this with our neighbors. They don't sell them weapons. They don't give them weapons like the US does for a lot of China's neighbors. So, I mean, China has a right to be pissed off and blockade territories in their hemisphere. When asked by the press, Trump refused to give a timeline on how long American control over Venezuela would last. The president said Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Secretary of War Pete Hegseth would act as viceroys of Venezuela. Trump added that he was willing to deploy American troops to occupy the South American nation. We're not afraid of boots on the ground, the president explained. He claimed Washington would pay for the occupation of Venezuela with profits from the country's oil, which is dubious at best. Trump said no Americans were killed and no military equipment was lost in the operation that captured Maduro early Saturday. Caracas had not reported on the Venezuelan casualties from the American raid and strikes. Trump said he ordered the attack on Venezuela because Maduro is trafficking narcotics to the U.S., hosting Washington's adversaries, and stealing American oil. Venezuela is not a major trafficking hub and is not listed by the Drug Enforcement Agency as responsible for fentanyl order entering the U.S. The president and Rubio suggested a similar operation could take place in Cuba. So it's just like, my God, it's lie after lie after lie. By the USA enforcing its Monroe Doctrine to keep everyone out of the Americas, also domestic policy of Trump wants cheap at the pump, so this works. Once again, we'll see if this actually happens. I'm skeptical it does because we're also assuming that nothing else is going to go wrong in this situation, which I would not place money on that bet. You take out a president, do you think people are more or less likely to hate the country that did it? People are sharing videos from literally years ago saying that, oh my God, look, all these people are celebrating. They're pumping out propaganda overtime to get people on board with this. This situation, I do not think is over. So we kind of have to wait to see how this plays out. But once again, every other regime change, coup, things like that, always ended in disaster. We're just going to have to see that. Also, by taking Venezuela oil over, making barrels cheaper, that will also hamper Russian oil prices. Therefore, they won't keep their war going in Ukraine. We'll see about that because once again, Russia's able to buy oil off of the Saudis and everyone over there because they're still selling to them. So, let's see. Okay, so let's do this one. So, if you support the war in Venezuela or the military action in Venezuela, whether you want to call it a war or not, um, this is stupid on so many fronts because everybody wants mass deportations, right? And I'm one of those people in that camp. They have now stopped deportation flights. They were accepting deportation flights. Like Maduro is working with the US on deportation flights, but you can't have that. So now Venezuela says US suspended migrant repatriation flights set for Friday. So now we are in a worse off scenario than we were just a couple weeks ago. December 12th. Oh, this is actually an older story, but my understanding is the situation still is the same. Let me see if there is a more current story. Um, it's just they completely blockaded the air territory over Venezuela. The person I got this from had shared this recently. Um, deport flights. sus- Um, okay, yeah, 17 hours ago. Yeah, okay. Venezuela says, yeah, there's lots of stories about this, but a lot of them are older. Um, updated January 3rd. Let me see. I want to make sure I'm being accurate here. We're going around the country. Do not travel. Expect an increase deportation flights. Begins to meet. Okay, so actually, we don't know exactly if the flights have stopped. I'm seeing conflicting reports on this, but basically, I don't know if they actually legitimately are or not. The person had originally shared this, and I should have vetted it beforehand, but they did suspend deportation flights in early December. They seem to have resumed, but now the problem is that the airspace is shut down over Venezuela and has been for a while, and also the blockade on the island makes it a little bit more difficult. Um, or not island, the blockade on the country. So we'll see what happens, but once again, we're assuming that everybody is just going to cooperate with the US. And if they don't, what are we seriously going to commit to a full scale war with Venezuela over this stuff? Like, it's nuts, absolutely nuts. So that's pretty much all the stuff I got for Venezuela. I apologize for not being a little bit more ready beforehand, but I wanted to share some of the stuff from going on for Iran. Okay, so obviously we all know that Trump had committed airstrikes on Iran's nuclear facilities in a few of the different areas in Iran. I want to make sure I get all the city names right. So, nuclear facilities struck in Iran, June. Targeted facilities. Okay, yeah, Natanz, Bordeaux, and Isfahan. Okay, that's what I thought they were, but I just wanted to be sure. So the US had committed airstrikes on Iran against their nuclear facilities because Trump had said that they can't obtain a nuke, which, according to all signs, they weren't going for a nuke. They had 60% uranium enrichment, which is way up from which was set up after the US had departed from the JCPOA, which actually was a decent enough plan that kept uranium enrichment below 3% and had IAEA inspections and even US inspections. But then Trump, of course, ripped that up. And now the situation's only gotten worse. And they were in negotiations, and Trump had literally used negotiations as a ruse to bomb the country. I'm going to share a report that Trump knew exactly what was going on and had proceeded to bomb the country anyways. Stags. The entire Trump deportation plan was set up to maximize outrage while minimizing actual deportations. Yeah, exactly. So, like I said, if there was all this outrage and it was correlated to enormous amount of deportations, I wouldn't like it. But it's like, all right, well, at least you're doing something. But like, we're getting all the outrage and none of the deportations. I did the numbers on it, and there were, I think it was 327,000 deportations last year, which is only about 52,000 more than Joe Biden, which was like 273,000 as of last or 2024, his last year in office. You only got 50,000 more deportations under Trump. Now, granted, the number of people coming in has drastically dropped off. From my research, I understand that it is the lowest amount of people who've come across the border since 1973. There were still people coming over the border under the Trump administration. They lied when they said there were no people coming over the border. It is drastically less than there was coming in under Joe Biden because there were NGOs getting paid from the Joe Biden administration to have people come over. But a lot of that stuff did stop, much to Trump's credit, but there have not been mass deportations like was promised. But anyways, getting back to like the Iran stuff, Trump had bombed Iran based on a lie that was they're building a nuclear weapon. There's no evidence of that. They had nuclear enrichment, but it was a latent nuclear deterrent. They wanted to negotiate a way to basically lift sanctions off of them. So why wouldn't you lift sanctions and have cooperation with Iran? Oh, of course, because the US is in the pocket of Israel, and Trump's entire family and his administration takes copious amounts of money from the Israeli government and Israeli officials, dual citizens, Miriam Adelson, and all the I say Jewish people that are just in the law or in the Jewish lobby in the United States are working on behalf of the Israeli government, all have their hands in the pocket of the Trump administration. So of course you can't have cooperation with the Iranian regime. And they had talks with the Iranian regime, but they had largely used them to just get them to lower their guard so the US could strike them, which is just it's awful. Um, okay, so let's go to this tab, and this is published back June 13th, where Trump admits he knew about the strikes. So Trump, aware of strikes on Iran beforehand, says there were no surprises. Trump hopes Iran can return to the negotiating table, but notes that the U.S. was not involved in the strikes. President Donald Trump told Fox News chief political anchor Brett Baier on Thursday he was aware that Israel was going to conduct preemptive strikes on Iran before they happened. Iran cannot have a nuclear bomb, and we are hoping to get back to the negotiating table, but we will see. There are several people in the leadership in Iran that will not be coming back. Israeli strikes on Iran killed three of the country's top military commanders, including commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, Hossein Salami, chief of the Iranian armed forces, Mohammad Hossein Bagheri, and commander of Iran's emergency command, Gholam Ali Rashad. Trump has spoken to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu several times in recent days. And once again, this is dated back in June 13th. The Trump administration reached out to at least one key Middle Eastern ally to acknowledge that the strikes was going to happen, but said the U.S. was not involved in the strikes. The president said he hopes Iran returns to the negotiating table, though Iran has signaled its intention to pull out of further talks. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and his team had scheduled to meet with Iranian counterparts in Oman on Sunday. Israeli forces used around 200 fighter jets to strike targets in Iran, destroying dozens of radars and surface-to-air missile launchers, as well as nuclear facilities. Iran launched around 100 retaliatory drones toward Israel hours later, which Israeli forces said they were working to intercept. Trump said he is watching for any retaliation, and the U.S. Central Command CENTCOM is on high alert. He noted the U.S. is ready to defend itself and Israel if Iran retaliates. In recent weeks, the U.S. replenished Iron Dome missiles. So they literally knew that the strikes were going to happen, and they let it go. Now, there were some people who were a little bit more pro-Trump, obviously, than me, saying that, oh, well, Trump let the U.S. or let Iran strike Israel. Well, that's not true because eventually the U.S. stepped in and struck Iran. Granted, this situation could have been a lot worse. I think the Iranian regime is largely, I'd say, kind of cocked. They didn't really do anything. They gave the U.S. advance notice that they were going to do retaliatory airstrikes, so that way they could, get all these people out of the base that they were going to strike, and then let it go. Anybody with any knowledge of this issue knew that this just kicked the can down the road for a little bit. They could say they ended the war, but it's just kind of like you put it down to a low-level fizzle. Because now Trump is saying that they can't have a ballistic missile program. Okay, well, they're never going to go for that. Like they were never going to go with zero enrichment. They see it as a matter of national pride and sovereignty that they have enrichment. So unless you're willing to, once again, do regime change in Iran, then you're just going to have to accept they're going to have ballistic missiles and they're going to have some level of nuclear enrichment that, once again, they use for civilian purposes. They have a latent nuclear deterrent, and like even if they do break out, what are they going to do? Nuke Kansas? Are there going to be nukes in fucking Mar-a-Lago? No, like they wouldn't do this because they mutually assured destruction is a thing, and they don't really seek to go ballistic on other countries. Israel has a secret nuclear program that we all pretend that they don't, but they do. So in a recent press conference with Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump, they said that Iran can't have a ballistic missile program. Well, once again, they're not going to go for this. So that's telling you right there that either they're going to have to go back in or figure something else out. And I don't think they're going to back down from it because it's not Trump's fashion. He doesn't back down from these kind of challenges. So let's talk about this article from the Iranian Intel. Let me maximize this. Zoom in a little bit. What locked and loaded signals in Trump's message backing Iran's protests, which Trump did say that he basically threatened the regime if they shot protesters, which is like, I'm sorry, if they shoot protesters, yeah, that's a tragedy, but like, are we seriously going to go fucking commit regime change because they put down some protesters? I don't know. A phrase used by President Donald Trump in support of Iran's protesters carries a specific military meaning, analysts say, going beyond political rhetoric to signal a state of readiness to action. In a message published on his Truth Social account, Donald Trump warned that if Iran's rulers kill peaceful protesters, the United States would act to save the Iranian people. If Iran, and it's funny the typo, if Iran shots and violently kills peaceful protesters, which is their custom, the United States of America will come to their rescue. We are locked and loaded and ready to go. The phrase locked and loaded is a classic military expression in English, meaning a weapon is armed, ammunition is in place, and is ready to fire. Its roots lie in military training, particularly in the U.S. Armed Forces, and the term has appeared in military literature since at least the 18th century. Formally incorporated into weapons manuals around the time of World War II, the expression has long carried an operational and warning connotation. It's not merely a metaphor or casual figure of speech, but language traditionally used to indicate readiness for immediate action. The expression has also become widely familiar through pop culture in Hollywood war films, beginning notably in the 1949 film Sands of Iwo Jima, starring John Wayne. Lock and load is commonly used to signal imminent start of combat. The phrase has since been embedded in video games such as Call of Duty and Battlefield, where it typically precedes the intense fighting scenes. Trump has used similar language in high tension situations, including during confrontations involving North Korea and Syria. Senior U.S. officials often have also employed the term in moments of crisis, signaling that the military operation is not only under consideration, but operationally prepared. U.S. ready for military action. International relations scholar Kamran Matin described Trump's wording as an explicit threat that could be interpreted as readiness for military action. Matin told Iran International that in Trump's latest remarks, the scope of the threat appeared to expand beyond Iran's missile or regional activities to include the government's violent response to domestic protests. At the same time, he cautioned that Trump's personal style must be taken into account, noting that the president is known for shifting positions and statements that allow for multiple interpretations, which is true. However, Martin stated that verbal threats do not always translate into action. Despite signs of military preparedness by the United States and Israel in the region, Martin emphasized that there remains significant gap between verbal threats and actual military readiness and the political decision to launch a direct attack. So I really just wanted to read that because, once again, the situation in Iran is just largely unsolved. They're going to have to decide if Iran can have nuclear enrichment or if they can't. Okay, so if they can, then okay, well, we're good. We're letting it go and back to, business as usual. If they cannot have nuclear enrichment, then you're going to have to go in and either completely take out all the regime and install somebody who's willing to agree to those terms, which would just be an absolute disaster. Or you're going to have to just keep doing these strikes, assuming that Iran doesn't do anything in return. Every single time they kind of go back, they're always very diplomatic in their violent responses where they give US warning and then they go strike. If you continue to attack Iran, once again, you are operating under the assumption that they will continue to just do these, hey, we're going to strike you, make sure everybody's clear. They're assuming that they're going to continue to do this. I would not make that assumption because, once again, countries can act irrationally when you back them into a corner, and that's what we continue to do with Iran. I don't know how long you can do this. And what if they decide, all right, we're going to start attacking American military bases in the region and start killing people because you're continually killing our people and you're threatening our sovereignty? That's a real problem, and that's a real threat that could happen if they continue down this path and they don't kind of take an off ramp. They said that they gave Maduro and Iran a bunch of off ramps, but they didn't really. They always give them unreasonable standards to meet in negotiations. And then whenever they don't meet those unreasonable standards, they lose their mind and then usually commit to some form of military action. So I don't know what a lot of this stuff means. And maybe that's not sexy to say. I don't know what a lot of this stuff means, but I don't. If you're not willing to commit to some kind of talk, some kind of settlement, then you're just going to have to keep doing these kind of military operations every couple months. And I don't think that's a reliable way to conduct foreign policy, and I don't think it's good for the country, and I don't think it's good for the country that we're committing strikes against, obviously. So, I don't know what the map looks like in another few months. I don't know what it looks like in a month. I don't know what it even looks like in a week. All I know is that, we're sitting on a bunch of powder kegs, and hopefully they don't go off. And I don't know. I just don't know. So that's about all I wanted to cover today. I know a little bit of a shorter show compared to what I normally do, but I just want to get this out there and kind of give my take on things. Let's pray for peace. Let's hope everything works out for the best. Skeptical it will, but we'll just kind of have to see. So make sure you go to all the links below where you can find myself, everything I've got going on. Thanks to the channel members, Rachel Wilson, Siege, Trey 50, Daniel B. Cornish, and Abrogate D's. I appreciate you guys so much. And please, if you're listening right now, please consider becoming a channel member on YouTube. Hit the like button if you're listening. Do it now. Make sure you're subscribed. I put this in a post, but I had unlisted a lot of old, low viewed videos on YouTube, trying to get the channel back into the algorithm. We'll see what happens. So like I said, please make sure you like. Stags, thank you so much for stopping by. Um, yeah, hit the like button. I delisted all the videos. So if you go into my channel and go to playlists under podcasts, you'll be able to find all the old videos. But if you're just kind of searching through the channel, or if you enter them in the search, you're not going to be able to find them. All the high viewed ones you're going to be able to see because it was kind of helping the algorithm. But once again, I'm trying to get this channel in the algorithm. So I've had trouble getting this channel out there. I don't know if it's just shadow banned or if it's just me, which is totally possible. It's just me. But, we are fighting heavy YouTube suppression, I'm sure. So once again, likes, subscriptions, all that stuff really help out. So go to the Great Megalodon as well. Sign up for the Substack. I do appreciate all you guys over there, especially the paid subscribers. And if I got anything else, I will be on Nico House's show on Wednesday, 6 p.m. We may make that a regular thing. And in 2 weeks, I do have a really, really cool show, 10 days to be exact. A really, really cool show for everybody. I think everybody's going to enjoy. It's going to be the 1 year of Trump. And the person I have coming with me for that, I think everybody's really going to like. The last time he was on, it was very, very high viewed. And a lot of people seem to really like that show. And I think they're really going to like this one as well. So, and of course, Common Crown, go to commoncrown.com to figure out everything that we've got going on. And there will be a new song shortly. So now that is everything, guys, thank you so much for listening. And until next time, take care.